If I don't show up with a fiancé tonight, my life is over. Sienna Whitmore whispered those words into her reflection, her lipstick trembling against her bottom lip. The glittering gown on her body wasn't the problem. She could fake confidence. But facing her parents, her ex, and the entire board of Whitmore Enterprises without a man by her side, that was the scandal waiting to swallow her whole. Her mother had reminded her all week how humiliating it would be if she arrived alone again. Her father had hinted at setting her up with someone more suitable, and her ex, Nathan, would be there with his new model girlfriend, smirking as though Sienna had been nothing more than a stepping stone in his climb. The Whitmore Charity Gala wasn't just an event. It was a battlefield, and Sienna had no armor, except maybe the reckless plan she had set in motion. Her phone felt like a loaded weapon in her hand as she dialed the number from the agency profile she had saved days ago, convincing herself she'd never actually use it. She wasn't the type to hire a stranger for something so intimate, so dangerous. But desperation makes liars of us all. When the call connected, the silence on the other end pressed against her chest like a weight. Then a voice, low, rich, and steady, slid through the line. "You need a fiancé?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement, as if he already knew why she was calling. "Yes," Sienna said, her voice thinner than she wanted. "Just for tonight. I'll pay whatever your rate is. I need someone convincing, someone who can—" "Convincing isn't free," he interrupted smoothly. "And I don't play halfway. Once I walk into that room with you, there's no turning back. Understand?" Sienna's breath caught. Who even talked like that? He wasn't supposed to sound like he was in control. She was the one paying him. She should have felt powerful. But his tone flipped something inside her chest, a strange mixture of fear and thrill. "Understand," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she did. "Good. Text me the address. I'll be there in 30. The line went dead before she could respond. 30 minutes. Her pulse ricocheted as she grabbed her clutch and moved through her apartment like a ghost, her thoughts blurring between panic and relief. She didn't even know his real name, only the alias from the profile, Cole Harrington. It sounded too polished, too sharp for someone hired to play pretend. She pushed the thought away. Names didn't matter. Survival did. The knock came exactly 30 minutes later, sharp and decisive. Sienna's fingers froze on the clasp of her earring. She wasn't ready. She would never be ready. But when she opened the door, she forgot how to breathe. Cole Harrington wasn't the kind of man you hired. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and owned it without asking permission. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw cut like it had been sculpted to intimidate, his presence swallowed the doorway. His suit wasn't off the rack. It was tailored, stitched from fabric that whispered wealth. His eyes, steel gray, cool, and unreadable, met hers with the kind of focus that made her feel exposed. "Miss Whitmore," he said simply, his voice carrying a weight that made her name sound like a verdict. She stammered, "Why, yes. Thank you for coming." His gaze swept over her gown, lingering not in appreciation but in calculation, as though assessing whether she could play her role as well as he intended to play his. "We don't have much time," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Tell me what I need to know before we arrive. Names, faces, enemies." The word enemies made her blink, but he didn't look like he was joking. She scrambled to explain. Her parents, her ex-Nathan, the board members who thrived on gossip. As she spoke, he listened with unnerving stillness, his hands in his pockets, his expression giving nothing away. When she finished, he nodded once. "Understood. And your story for us?" "We've been dating for 6 months," she said quickly, the lie tasting both sweet and sour. "We met in New York at a charity function. You're a consultant. International business." His lips quirked, the closest thing to a smile she'd seen from him. Conveniently vague. "I'll fill in the rest." He offered his arm as though the decision had already been made, as though she hadn't been the one to call him. "Shall we?" Her hand hesitated before slipping into the crook of his arm. The heat of him was startling, grounding, and terrifying at once. She tried to remind herself. This was a transaction, nothing more. But as they descended to the waiting car, a sleek black vehicle she didn't remember ordering, doubt pressed hard against her ribs. The driver opened the door without a word, bowing his head to Cole, as though he wasn't some hired stand-in, but someone far more significant. Sienna slid into the back seat, her mind spinning. "Was that part of the package?" she whispered. "What package?" Cole's eyes flicked to hers, sharp and unflinching. Before she could answer, the city lights swallowed them, and her stomach twisted tighter with every turn that brought them closer to the Whitmore Gala. By the time the car slowed in front of Sterling Heights, the grand ballroom where the event was held, Sienna could barely keep her hand from trembling. Photographers flashed outside, guests in designer gowns and tuxedos swarming the steps like peacocks. Every whisper tonight would matter. Every glance would be recorded. And she was about to walk into it all with a man who was supposed to be a stranger, but already felt like something far more dangerous. Cole stepped out first, offering his hand with the kind of commanding grace that drew eyes immediately. When she placed her hand in his grip closed over hers, firm and steady, and a shiver climbed her spine. Together, they ascended the steps, and the crowd seemed to part for them. The whispers started instantly. "Who's that? When did Sienna get engaged? Who is he?" The sound was intoxicating, terrifying, exactly what she needed. But just as they reached the top, Cole leaned down, his lips dangerously close to her ear. "Smile, Sienna. They're watching." She obeyed before she realized she had. And for the first time that night, she wasn't sure who was playing pretend anymore. The Whitmore Charity Gala glimmered like a golden trap, chandeliers spilling light across marble floors, violins threading through the chatter of the city's wealthiest. Sienna had attended this event every year since she was old enough to wear heels, but never had the air felt so suffocating. Every eye followed her and the stranger at her side, drinking in the spectacle like it was their next glass of champagne. Cole didn't falter. His stride was purposeful, his posture commanding, his presence so magnetic that whispers rippled behind them in waves. He wasn't merely fitting into the role of fiancé. He was dominating it, as if this ballroom had always belonged to him. Sienna's parents spotted them first. Her mother, glamorous in emerald silk, lifted her brows in visible shock before quickly rearranging her expression into one of delighted surprise. Her father's eyes, sharp and assessing, flicked to Cole with suspicion before settling on Sienna with unspoken questions. She braced herself, squeezing Cole's arm tighter. "Mother, father," she said brightly, willing her voice to sound casual. "This is Cole Harrington, my fiancé." Her mother gasped just enough for dramatics. "Fiancé." The word clinked through the air like dropped crystal. "Darling, you didn't tell us. We wanted to keep it private," Sienna interrupted quickly, heat climbing her neck. "But tonight felt right." She glanced at Cole, praying he would back her up. He didn't just back her up, he delivered. He reached for Sienna's hand, lifting it slowly, deliberately, pressing his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so old-world and intimate that her mother nearly swooned. His voice was smooth velvet when he spoke. "I've been waiting for the right moment to meet you both. Sienna means everything to me." The words, though scripted, sent a shiver down Sienna's spine. For a split second, she almost believed him. Her father's brow furrowed. "Harrington? Which Harrington?" Cole's gray eyes didn't flicker. "There are many of us," he said with a polite smile that revealed nothing, "but only one who matters to her." Her father narrowed his gaze, unsatisfied but unwilling to press further in public. Her mother, however, was already beaming. "Well, aren't you charming? And handsome? Sienna, you've outdone yourself." Sienna forced a laugh, her nerves jangling like loose keys in her chest. But before she could breathe relief, a voice sliced through the hum of the crowd. "Sienna." The sound of her name in that tone made her stomach clench. She turned, and there he was, Nathan, her ex, the man who had broken her heart with a smile as sharp as a blade. He was as polished as ever in his midnight suit, his arm draped casually around a model whose beauty was as sharp and hollow as glass. His smirk widened when his eyes landed on Cole. "And who's this? Don't tell me you finally found someone to tolerate you." Sienna's breath hitched, humiliation tightening her throat, but Cole didn't let her speak. He stepped forward, his body angled protectively, his presence suddenly lethal. "I'm the man who's lucky enough to stand beside her," he said, his voice edged with steel. The tension in the room shifted, a subtle but undeniable current of dominance. Nathan's smirk faltered before he forced a laugh. Lucky indeed, though Sienna has always had expensive taste. The insult burned, but Cole only smiled, slow and deliberate, the kind of smile that unsettled. "Some things," he said, his eyes locked on Nathan, "are priceless. But perhaps you wouldn't understand that." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Sienna's heart thundered, not only from the confrontation, but from the terrifying realization that Cole wasn't just acting. He was enjoying this. Nathan muttered something under his breath and pulled his date away, but the damage had been done. The whispers swirled faster now, questions flying through the crowd like sparks. Sienna swallowed hard, her hand still caught in Cole's as though it belonged there. "That was risky," she whispered when they moved toward the ballroom doors. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he cut in softly, his gaze flicking to hers. "If you're mine, even for a night, no one disrespects you." The words made her stumble, her heart betraying her with its uneven rhythm. This was supposed to be a performance, nothing more. So why did his tone feel so dangerously sincere? Inside the ballroom, the night pressed on with toasts and speeches, laughter ringing against crystal walls. Cole played his role with unnerving precision, weaving stories of how they had met. Small details improvised so seamlessly that even Sienna found herself nodding along, as though they were memories she had lived. He charmed the board members, outmaneuvered her father's pointed questions, and even drew a rare smile from her notoriously cold uncle. Everyone was captivated. Everyone believed. And Sienna was drowning. Every touch of his hand on her back, every glance that lingered longer than necessary, every word that rolled from his tongue with casual possession, it blurred the lines of their deal. This was supposed to be simple. Hire a man, fake an engagement, survive a gala. But Cole wasn't simple. He wasn't normal. He wasn't anything she had expected. And the most terrifying part? He seemed to know it. At one point, as the string quartet shifted to a softer melody and couples swirled onto the dance floor, Cole leaned down, his lips brushing her ear again. "Dance with me." It wasn't a question. Her chest tightened. "I don't think," he murmured. "Just follow." Before she could argue, he pulled her into the sea of dancers, his hand firm on her waist, his other guiding her hand with practiced ease. The world narrowed to the rhythm of the music and the heat of his body against hers. He moved like a man born to command, every step certain, every turn flawless. She hated how natural it felt, how easy it was to forget they were strangers. "You're good at this," she said breathlessly, trying to regain control of the conversation. His gray eyes locked on hers, unblinking. "I don't do anything halfway." The words lingered between them, heavy and layered with meaning she couldn't unravel. When the song ended, she was trembling, not from nerves, but from something far more dangerous. Cole leaned closer, his voice low enough for only her. "Remember what I said earlier. Once I walked in with you, there's no turning back." That wasn't a line, Sienna. That was a promise. Her lips parted, confusion and fear tangling with the flicker of something she didn't dare name. But before she could respond, applause erupted for the next speech, and Cole released her hand, his mask of charm slipping back into place as though nothing had happened. Yet Sienna knew something had. She just didn't know if she was ready to face it. The gala stretched on like a flawless performance, each act carefully staged beneath the glow of chandeliers and the hum of whispered gossip. But beneath Sienna's polished smile, her nerves frayed with every passing second. Cole was too perfect, too seamless in his role, never stumbling, never second-guessing. He charmed her mother with stories that sounded real, left her father begrudgingly impressed, and fielded every probing question from the board members with ease. It should have been a relief, but instead it left Sienna with a gnawing unease. Who was this man, really, and why did he slip into her world so effortlessly? At one point, she excused herself under the pretense of fresh air, stepping out onto the balcony where the night air was cool and merciful against her overheated skin. Her hands trembled as she gripped the railing, her mind replaying every interaction, every word. She had hired a man to pretend, not to take control of her narrative. Yet here he was, weaving himself into her life as if he had always belonged. She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself, when his voice came from the shadows behind her. "You shouldn't be out here alone." She spun, startled, and found Cole stepping into the moonlight, his presence cutting through the quiet like a blade. "You scared me," she whispered, her heart hammering. "Good," he said simply. "That means you're paying attention." His gaze settled on her, sharp and searching, and she hated how easily he saw through her defenses. "You're too tense," he added. "Everyone in there can see it." She bristled. "Of course I'm tense. I hired a stranger to pretend to be my fiancé in front of my family. It's insane." His lips curved faintly. "And yet, you chose me." Sienna's pulse jumped. "You were just convenient." His eyes held hers, unblinking. "Nothing about me is convenient." The words sank into her bones, heavy with an unspoken truth she couldn't grasp. She looked away, her breath uneven. "Why are you so good at this? You act like you've done it 1,000 times before." He stepped closer, the space between them thinning, his voice low. "Maybe I'm just a quick learner." She wanted to push him, to demand answers, but the intensity in his gaze locked her in place. Then, from the corner of her eye, movement caught her attention. Nathan, lingering at the ballroom doors, watching them with a predatory curiosity. Her stomach dropped. The last thing she needed was to give her ex more ammunition. "We should go back inside," she murmured. Cole's hand brushed against hers, subtle but grounding. "Let him watch," he said, his tone almost daring. "The more he doubts, the more he talks. And the more he talks, the more they'll believe us." It was infuriatingly logical, and it made her chest tighten with both frustration and reluctant admiration. She pulled her hand away, stepping past him toward the ballroom. "You're enjoying this too much," she accused softly. He followed without hesitation. "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe I'm just good at protecting what's mine." The word mine lingered like smoke, clinging to her thoughts long after they rejoined the glittering crowd. Back inside, the night's final act approached. The charity auction, the event's highlight. Items lined the stage, each more extravagant than the last. Rare wines, diamond jewelry, vacations to private islands. Sienna had watched this spectacle for years. The bidding war was a display of ego and power. She usually hated it, the way people treated money like confetti, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, she was standing beside a man who wasn't supposed to have any power here, yet radiated more control than anyone else in the room. When the auctioneer announced the final item, a custom-designed necklace of sapphires and diamonds, valued in the millions, the crowd buzzed with anticipation. The bids flew fast, numbers climbing higher, hands raising with arrogance. Sienna expected Cole to stay silent. He was supposed to be an actor, after all. But then his voice cut through the noise, steady and commanding. 5 million. The room froze. Heads turned, eyes wide, whispers sharp and immediate. Sienna's breath caught in her throat. 5 million? That wasn't possible. He wasn't supposed to have that kind of money. This wasn't part of the act. The auctioneer blinked, startled but eager. "We have 5 million. Do I hear 5.5? Another bidder tried to challenge, but Cole's gaze swept the room like a storm, daring anyone to test him. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The hammer fell. "Sold. To Mr. Harrington for 5 million. Applause erupted, but Sienna's ears rang. Her hand tightened on his arm as they returned to their table, her voice a sharp whisper. "What was that? You can't. How could you?" He leaned in, his expression calm, his words slicing through her panic. "I told you, I don't do anything halfway." Her chest constricted. "You're not supposed to be real. You're supposed to be fake?" He supplied, his eyes glittering. "Pretend." She swallowed hard. "Yes." He leaned closer, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "Then stop asking me questions you don't want the answers to." She pulled back, searching his face for cracks, for something to prove this was all part of the performance. But there was nothing. Only the unsettling certainty that Cole Harrington was far more than what she had bargained for. As the night wound down and guests began to drift toward their limousines, her parents gushed over Cole, her mother nearly glowing with approval, her father grudgingly impressed. Sienna played her role, smiling, laughing, nodding, but inside she was unraveling. The man she had hired wasn't an actor. He wasn't even pretending. And the most terrifying realization of all was that the entire room now believed their lie so completely that walking it back seemed impossible. As they slipped out into the night, the cool air hitting her flushed skin, Sienna finally dared to whisper the question clawing at her chest. "Who are you, really?" Cole opened the car door for her, his expression unreadable, his voice quiet but firm. "The man you paid to act as your fiancé." For now. It wasn't an answer, not really, but it was all he was willing to give. And as the car pulled away from the glittering ballroom, Sienna knew with bone-deep certainty that she had stepped into something far more dangerous than a simple lie. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as the car glided silently through the streets, but Sienna barely noticed the passing skyline. Her thoughts twisted in knots, looping back to the image of Cole raising his hand in the auction, his voice cutting through the crowd with authority, his confidence absolute. He had spent $5 million like it was nothing, as though it meant less to him than the champagne flutes being cleared from their table. No hired actor, no desperate stand-in could do that. This man wasn't who she thought he was. She sat stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the shadows outside, until Cole finally broke the silence. "You're angry," he said, his tone calm, measured, almost amused. "You think," she snapped, turning to him, her voice low but sharp. "You were supposed to keep your head down, play the role, and vanish when it was over. Instead, you just spent $5 million like it was pocket change. Now everyone in that room thinks you're exactly who they need me to be," he interrupted smoothly. His gaze met hers, unflinching, and for a moment she felt stripped bare, exposed under the weight of it. "You wanted a fiancé who could silence doubts, shield you from scandal, make your parents believe. I delivered." Her chest tightened, her voice quieter now. "But at what cost? That wasn't pretend. That was real." He didn't answer immediately, and the silence stretched like a taut wire between them. Finally, he leaned back, his profile cast in shadow, his tone almost dismissive. "Not everything real needs to be explained." Sienna turned away, frustration clawing at her ribs. She hated how easily he dismissed her questions, hated that the power dynamic she thought she controlled had shifted completely into his hands. And yet, beneath the anger, a dangerous spark lingered, curiosity. Who was this man? Why would someone like him agree to her reckless scheme? The car pulled into her family's estate, the gates swinging open to reveal the sprawling grounds lit with soft amber lights. Cole exited first, extending his hand as though this was routine, as though they had walked this path 1,000 times before. Against her better judgment, she let him help her out, his touch firm, steadying, a reminder of the control he wielded even in silence. Inside, the house was quiet, her parents already retired for the night, the staff moving discreetly in the background. Sienna walked swiftly to the library, the one place she could breathe, but Cole followed, uninvited, his presence filling the space until it seemed smaller, more suffocating. "You don't trust me," he said, not as a question, but statement. She laughed bitterly. "Trust you? I don't even know you." He tilted his head slightly, his eyes glinting. "You know enough." "No," she shot back, the words tumbling out now, sharper than she intended. "All I know is that you're not who you said you were. You're not some desperate man from an agency. You walk into a room, and everyone listens. You drop millions like it's nothing. And you," she cut herself off, her chest heaving, her eyes locked on his. He waited, patient, silent, forcing her to say it. "You terrify me," she finished softly, her voice cracking. For the first time, his expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across his face, gone before she could name it. He stepped closer, his voice low, intimate, every word a razor. "Good, because you should be terrified, but not of me." Her pulse spiked. "Then of what?" His gaze held hers, unwavering. Of the truth. The cryptic answer lodged in her chest like a shard of glass. Painful and impossible to ignore. She wanted to demand more, to force him to peel back the mask. But before she could speak, a knock sounded at the door. Both of them turned as the butler entered, holding an envelope on a silver tray. "This just arrived for you, Miss Whitmore." Sienna frowned, taking the envelope. There was no sender, only her name scrawled in sharp handwriting across the front. Her stomach twisted as she tore it open, pulling out a single sheet of paper. For words stared back at her, written in ink that bled into the page like a warning. "Do you know him?" Her breath caught, her hands trembling as she looked up at Cole, who stood calmly, his expression unreadable, as if he had been expecting this. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaky. He didn't move, didn't blink. "It's a question you'll have to answer sooner than you think." Fear coiled in her stomach, cold and heavy. Whoever sent that note knew. They knew Cole wasn't who he claimed to be. They knew she had brought a stranger into her world. And they wanted her to doubt him, wanted to plant the seed of mistrust that was already thriving inside her. She clutched the note tighter, her mind spinning. "Are you in danger?" she asked before she could stop herself. His lips curved faintly, but it wasn't a smile. "Danger has a way of finding me, and now it's found you." The words chilled her, the finality in his tone like a door slamming shut. She wanted to scream, to push him away, to tear the truth out of him. But instead she stood frozen, staring at the man she had thought she hired, realizing she was entangled in something far beyond her control. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, rattling them in their frames, as if the night itself was warning her. She glanced at the note again, the question burning in her mind, and for the first time, she admitted the terrifying answer to herself. No, she didn't know him at all. Sleep was impossible. Sienna tossed in the satin sheets of her bed, staring up at the ornate ceiling while the question from the note burned through her mind. "Do you know him?" The words wouldn't leave her alone, whispering over and over until every breath felt like a lie. She turned restlessly, Cole's face imprinted in her thoughts. The way he had spoken with unshakable confidence, the way he had thrown millions around as if money meant nothing, the way he had warned her she should be terrified. Nothing about him added up, and yet he had fit into her life too seamlessly. It was like forcing a puzzle piece in a place, only to realize later the picture didn't match. By dawn, exhaustion had sunk into her bones, but it wasn't enough to quiet her thoughts. She slipped out of bed, wrapped a robe around her shoulders, and padded down to the library where her father's old computer still hummed in the corner. It was a relic compared to her sleek laptop upstairs, but it was discreet, a safe place to search without drawing attention. With shaky hands, she typed his name, Cole Harrington. At first, nothing. No agency listings, no records matching the man she thought she had hired. But then, deeper in the results, she found fragments, business articles, vague mentions of a C. Harrington attached to companies she didn't recognize, anonymous donations in staggering amounts, shadowed photos in glossy magazines where his face was always turned just slightly away. Her pulse hammered as she clicked one article, her breath catching at the headline. The Phantom Billionaire. Who is Cole Harrington? The words leapt from a screen. According to the piece, Cole was an elusive figure in the financial world, a man who moved billions through silent partnerships and private investments, always behind the scenes, always untraceable. No interviews, no official photographs, just whispers of power and influence that rivaled the most visible titans of industry. She stared at the screen, the words blurring. A billionaire. He wasn't an actor. He wasn't even pretending. He was real, too real, and she had dragged him in her life like a moth inviting fire. A sudden creak broke her focus, and her head snapped up to see Cole standing in the doorway, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. The morning light caught the sharp lines of his face, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. "Looking me up?" His voice was soft, almost casual, but she could hear the steel beneath it. Her heart lurched. I couldn't sleep. He stepped into the room slowly, deliberately, his presence filling the space until she felt cornered. Curiosity can be dangerous, Sienna. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Why didn't you tell me? Why pretend to be someone else? Why? Because you weren't ready to know, he cut in, his tone final, brooking no argument. Her chest ached with frustration. That's not your choice to make. His gaze locked onto hers, unwavering. It became my choice the second you called me. You think you hired me, Sienna, but you don't understand. I'll let you hire me. The words hit her like a blow. She staggered back a step, shaking her head. That doesn't make sense. His lips curved faintly, but it wasn't a smile. Doesn't it? She turned away, her hands trembling, tears burning at the edges of her eyes. Nothing about this was fair. She had made a desperate choice, one reckless call to save herself from humiliation, and instead she had opened the door to a man who played by rules she couldn't even see. What do you want from me? She whispered, the question cracking like glass in her throat. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Cole moved closer, his hand lifting as though to touch her, only to stop inches away, hovering in the charged space between them. The truth, he said finally, his voice low, weighted. And when I have it, you'll understand why none of this was an accident. She turned to him, stunned. What truth? His eyes softened just slightly, but his answer was a whisper of smoke. The one your family has been hiding from you. Her breath caught, her world tilting on its axis. She stared at him, unable to process the enormity of his words. Her family? Her parents, who had built their empire on tradition, on reputation, on carefully guarded secrets? She wanted to argue, to deny, but deep down, she knew. She had always known. Shadows lingered in the halls of the Whitmore estate, locked doors and hushed conversations, deals made behind closed doors. Things she had chosen not to see. Cole's gaze burned into her, steady and unyielding. You think I'm a danger, Sienna, but I'm a shield. Without me, the truth will tear you apart. Her knees weakened, and she sank into the chair, her head spinning. Why me? She whispered, more to herself than to him. Why get involved at all? He studied her for a long, breathless moment before answering. Because sometimes the right lies bring us closer to the truth. She shook her head, overwhelmed, her mind racing with more questions than she could contain. But before she could speak again, his phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. He slipped the device away without a word, but she saw the tension in his jaw, the sudden alertness in his posture. What was that? She asked, her voice tentative. Nothing you need to worry about, he replied, already moving toward the door. Stay here. Panic rose in her chest. Cole. He stopped, turning back, his eyes locking onto hers with a force that stole her breath. Do you trust me? The question struck like a lightning bolt. She opened her mouth, but the words tangled in her throat. Did she trust him? Could she? After everything he had hidden, every truth he refused to reveal, could she hand him her trust now? But before she could answer, he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, leaving her alone in the suffocating silence. Her gaze fell back to the glowing screen of the computer, the article still open, the name Cole Harrington glaring at her like a challenge. And for the first time, Sienna realized she wasn't just tangled in a lie anymore. She was living inside a secret, and secrets, especially the kind tied to men like Cole Harrington, never stayed buried for long. The house had never felt so silent, so full of shadows that whispered at the edge of hearing. Sienna sat in the library long after Cole left, her eyes fixed on the note that still trembled in her hand. Do you know him? The question pulsed like a drumbeat, demanding an answer she couldn't give. She had thought the lie she created would be simple, a performance they would all applaud and forget, but now the weight of it pressed on her chest, suffocating her. Hours passed before she gathered enough strength to rise, tucking the note into the pocket of her robe as she crept upstairs. The halls were dark, the antique portraits on the walls staring at her with judgmental eyes, as though even the painted ancestors knew she was tangled in something bigger than she could control. She pushed open the door to her parents' study, a room she rarely entered, and froze. The desk was covered in files and contracts, folders stamped with the Whitmore seal, but what caught her breath was the open drawer left slightly ajar. She stepped closer, her pulse racing, and pulled it open fully. Inside was a folder marked with a name she had never seen before, Harrington. Her hands trembled as she flipped it open, her eyes scanning the contents. Financial records, transfers, a merger proposal that had never gone public. Her family's empire entangled with Harrington Enterprises in ways she didn't understand, hidden in shadows. The signatures at the bottom of the page made her blood run cold. Her father's hand next to another she now recognized as Cole's. Her head spun, the room tilting. This wasn't random. Cole hadn't just appeared in her life. He had been tied to her family all along, woven into their secrets like a thread she had never noticed. She shoved the folder back into the drawer, heart pounding, just as the door creaked open behind her. Sienna? Her mother's voice floated in, gentle but sharp at the edges. Sienna spun around, the blood draining from her face. "What are you doing in here?" her mother asked softly, stepping into the room, her silk robe trailing behind her. Sienna stammered, "I couldn't sleep. I was just looking." Her mother's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but her smile remained perfectly composed. "This room isn't for looking, darling. You know that." Her voice was warm, but underneath lay a current of steel. "Go back to bed." Sienna hesitated, then nodded quickly, brushing past her mother without another word. But as she left, she caught her mother's gaze lingering on the drawer, as though she knew exactly what Sienna had seen. Back in her room, she locked the door, her mind unraveling. The pieces didn't fit neatly, but the edges were sharp enough to cut. Cole, her family, the secrets hidden in those files. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of her window, trying to breathe, when movement in the driveway below caught her eye. A black car she didn't recognize idled near the gates, its headlights off, its windows tinted. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't one of their cars. It wasn't anyone she knew. She squinted, heart hammering, as a figure stepped out, speaking briefly to the guard before slipping something into his hand. The gates opened without hesitation, the car rolling silently onto the estate grounds. Panic surged through her, her first thought of Cole, wherever he had gone. Her second thought, the note. Whoever had written it, maybe they weren't just watching. Maybe they were here. She backed away from the window, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone. But before she could dial, the device buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Stay quiet if you want to live." The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. Her breath came in shallow gasps, fear clawing up her throat. She scrambled to pick it up, her mind screaming at her to call Cole, to call anyone, but her hands were frozen, useless. Then, a sharp knock at her door. Her body went rigid, her heart nearly stopping. "Sienna?" It was her father's voice, deep and commanding. Relief flickered, but unease quickly followed. She unlocked the door, opening a crack. He stood there, perfectly calm, as though nothing was amiss. "Are you all right?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over her pale face. I thought I saw something," she stammered, her voice trembling. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "The estate is well guarded. You're safe here." But something in his tone made her stomach twist. "Safe." The word rang hollow. He reached out, brushing her cheek with his thumb, a gesture meant to comfort, but only deepened her unease. "Try to get some rest," he said softly, before turning away down the hall. She shut the door, locking it again, pressing her back against the wood. "Safe." The word echoed in her chest, but she didn't believe it. She curled onto the edge of her bed, clutching the note in one hand, her phone in the other, waiting for dawn. When morning finally came, she found Cole in the garden, standing with his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, as if he had been awake all night. His eyes lifted to hers the second she approached, sharp and searching. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. She held out the note, her voice breaking. "Someone was here. They sent this. They told me to stay quiet if I wanted to live." His expression darkened, the easy composure slipping for the first time. He took the note, scanning it, then tearing it cleanly in half. "Don't keep this kind of thing. It gives them power." She shook her head, frustration and fear colliding. Cole, I need answers. My family, you, whoever was here last night. I'm drowning in secrets, and I don't know who to trust. His hand closed gently but firmly over hers, grounding her. Trust me, he said, his voice low, steady. Because whatever storm is coming, I'm the only one who can pull you through it. Her throat tightened, her chest aching. She wanted to resist, to push him away, but some part of her, the part that recognized truth even when it was terrifying, whispered that he was right. And yet, as she looked into his eyes, she knew one thing for certain. Trusting Cole Harrington might save her life, or it might destroy it. The morning lingered heavy and restless, the sky over the estate painted in pale gray, as if the world itself sensed the weight pressing down on her. Sienna sat across from Cole at the long breakfast table, her untouched plate between them. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint clink of his coffee cup as he set it down. He was composed as always, his every movement precise, controlled, but she couldn't stop watching him, couldn't stop searching for something human beneath the steel. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice low and raw. You don't sleep, do you? His gaze lifted to hers, steady and unreadable. Sleep is a luxury. She tilted her head, trying to pierce the mask. That's not an answer. He studied her for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling under his chin. Some people chase sleep to escape their demons. I've learned to face mine awake. His words lodged in her chest, heavy, but they only sharpened her curiosity. What demons? She pressed softly. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw hesitation flicker across his face like a crack in armor. But then he shook his head, dismissing the question, retreating back into the fortress of silence. She felt a pang of frustration. You can't keep doing that, she whispered, closing yourself off, pretending everything is under control when clearly it isn't. You tell me to trust you, but you give me nothing to hold on to. Her voice trembled at the edges, vulnerable in a way she hadn't meant to show. Cole's eyes softened, the steel shifting into something darker, heavier, almost tender. He rose slowly, moving around the table until he was standing before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. You think I don't want to tell you? His voice was low, roughened by something she couldn't name. You think I enjoy holding back? She swallowed, her breath catching. Then why don't you? His hand lifted, hesitating for just a heartbeat before brushing against her cheek, the touch feather-light but burning through her skin. Because the truth isn't a gift, Sienna, he said, his voice thick with something unspoken. It's a weapon, and once I give it to you, there's no taking it back. Her chest ached, torn between fear and longing. She leaned into his hand despite herself, her eyes stinging. Maybe I'd rather bleed from the truth than suffocate from lies. The words cracked in her throat, but she meant them, every jagged piece. For a moment, his facade slipped. His eyes closed, his forehead lowering until it almost touched hers, his breath warm against her skin. The closeness stole the air from her lungs, the space between them charged, fragile, impossible. He lingered there, silent, as though wrestling with something inside himself. When he finally pulled back, his expression was rawer than she had ever seen, the mask shaken but not shattered. You're stronger than you realize, he murmured, and that terrifies me. She blinked, confusion lacing with the heat rising in her chest. Why would my strength terrify you? His lips curved faintly, but it wasn't a smile. Because strength makes you a target, and I've already made you one. The weight of his words sank into her bones, chilling and yet laced with a strange kind of care, as though beneath all the danger there was a man who feared losing her more than anything else. She reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing against his wrist, grounding him the way he had grounded her before. Then stop carrying it alone, she whispered. Whatever storm is coming, let me face it with you. For a heartbeat, silence hung between them, so fragile it felt like the world might shatter if either of them breathed too loud. Then he pulled his hand back gently, severing the contact, his expression hardening once more. You don't know what you're asking. Maybe not, she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "But I know what it feels like to be lied to, and I can't keep living in the dark." His eyes lingered on her, heavy with conflict, as though he stood on the edge of something he couldn't afford to step into. And yet, just before he turned away, she caught it. The flicker of a man who wanted to trust, who wanted to let go, even if it destroyed them both. The moment stretched and broke, leaving her aching with questions and with something far more dangerous, a longing she didn't want to name. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the estate in gold, she found herself standing on the balcony again, staring at the horizon. Cole joined her silently, his presence a quiet force at her side. Neither of them spoke for a long time, the silence less suffocating now, more like a language only they understood. At last, she turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever wonder what would be like if this had been real? If I hadn't hired you, if you were just mine?" His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the mask fell completely. The rawness there, the unguarded vulnerability, made her breath hitch. Every second, he admitted, the confession tearing from him like it had been caged too long. The air between them thickened, heavy with all the words they couldn't say, all the truths still locked away. And though neither of them moved, neither dared to close the final distance. The tension bound them tighter than any touch could. The world outside might have been closing in, danger circling like wolves, but in that moment, on that balcony, there was only the two of them, and the terrifying, impossible pull that neither of them could fight forever. The night had grown restless, the kind that hummed with unspoken warnings. The estate was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made even the air feel on edge. Sienna lingered in the library, her fingers trailing along the spines of old leather-bound books, trying to distract herself from the storm inside her chest. Cole had vanished hours ago, probably buried in calls, plans, strategies she wasn't allowed to know. And she was left with the echo of his confession from earlier, every second. It wouldn't stop replaying in her head, making her chest tighten until breathing felt impossible. When the door creaked open, she turned, her heart leaping before she even saw him. But it wasn't Cole. It was Evan. His smirk was sharp, his presence wrong against the golden lamplight. "You really thought you could buy safety, Sienna?" he drawled, stepping into the room with the casual confidence of a man who believed the ground belonged to him. Her blood went cold. How did you get in here?" Evan's eyes glinted with malice. "Money buys everything. Guards, access, even silence." He took another step, closing the distance, and she backed away instinctively, her hand brushing the edge of the desk behind her. "Cole won't let you. Cole isn't here." Evan cut in, his voice like a blade. "And even if he was, you think he can save you from me? You don't know what kind of man you've tangled yourself with." His words twisted like poison, but she forced her voice steady. "You're wrong. He's nothing like you." Evan chuckled darkly. "That's where you're blind. Cole and I, we're two sides of the same coin. You think his money is clean? You think his empire is built on virtue? Ask yourself why he never lets you in. Ask yourself what he's hiding." Her throat tightened. The doubts, the walls Cole had built, all the unanswered questions, Evan was cutting straight into the cracks. She shook her head, but the hesitation gave him more power. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Men like us don't change, Sienna, and men like me don't let go of what's ours." His hand shot forward, gripping her wrist before she could recoil. She gasped, panic surging, her pulse racing beneath his hold. "Let me go," she cried, struggling against his iron grip. Before Evan could respond, the library door slammed open with a force that rattled the walls. Cole stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing, his entire frame coiled with fury so sharp it could have cut glass. "Touch her again," he said, his voice deadly calm, "and I'll make sure you never use that hand again." Evan's smirk faltered, but he didn't release her. "Cole," he drawled mockingly, "always the knight in shining armor. Except we both know your armor is rusted and your hands are just as bloody as mine." Cole's eyes darkened, a storm contained barely beneath the surface. "The difference between us, Evan, is that I don't use people as pawns." His gaze flicked to Sienna, softening just for an instant. And I don't hurt the people He stopped himself, the words strangled, unfinished, but Sienna heard them anyway, every unspoken syllable lodged in her chest. Evan laughed, sharp and cruel. Always so noble. But we both know this game ends the same way. You can't protect her forever. Cole moved, swift as lightning, his hand seizing Evan's wrist and yanking it off Sienna with brutal precision. The sound of bones straining filled the room, and Evan hissed in pain. Cole shoved him back, his body a shield between Evan and Sienna, his presence a wall of fury and control. "Get out," Cole growled. "This is your last warning." Evan straightened, rubbing his wrist, his smirk creeping back despite the pain. "This isn't over," he promised, his gaze cutting toward Sienna. "Not for you. Not for him. When she learns the truth, Cole, she'll hate you more than she hates me." With that, he turned and slipped out into the corridor, his footsteps fading but his venom lingering in the air. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Sienna's ragged breathing. Her body trembled, adrenaline flooding her veins. Cole turned to her, his face etched with concern, but the storm still raged in his eyes. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly, though her wrist ached where Evan had gripped it. "No, I'm fine." But her voice betrayed the tremor inside her. Cole's jaw tightened as he reached for her hand gently, lifting it to inspect the red mark. His touch was careful, reverent, a stark contrast to Evan's violence. "I should have been here sooner," he muttered, his voice low with guilt. "I should have known he'd find a way in." She stared at him, her heart thundering. "You can't blame yourself for his choices." His eyes lifted to hers, something raw flickering in them. "You don't understand." Everything Evan said, "I don't care what he said," she interrupted sharply, her voice breaking. "I don't care what secrets you think you're protecting me from. All I know is you walked in that door and you saved me. That's what I care about." The words cracked something open between them. His grip on her hand tightened, his breath uneven. "You're making it harder, Sienna," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Harder to keep the line. Harder to remember why I can't." He trailed off, his restraint trembling, his composure fraying at the edges. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Why you can't what?" she asked softly, stepping closer, her free hand brushing against his chest. His heartbeat thundered beneath her touch, a wild rhythm that betrayed the storm inside him. His eyes searched hers, tortured and desperate, as though he stood on the edge of cliff. "Why I can't let myself fall," he admitted, the confession torn from him. The words sliced through the air, raw and devastating. And yet, instead of fear, all Sienna felt was clarity. "Then maybe," she whispered, her voice shaking with both fear and longing, "we fall together." For a heartbeat, silence reigned, the air charged, the world holding its breath. And then his lips crashed against hers, fierce and unrestrained, the dam finally breaking. The kiss was fire and desperation, years of silence and restraint burning away in an instant. Her hands clutched at him, his arms wrapping around her, as though he would never let go. It was reckless, it was dangerous, it was everything they had been denying, and it was inevitable. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Cole rested his forehead against hers, his voice ragged. "I can't lose you." "Then don't," she whispered, her tears mingling with her smile. "Just don't." The night after Evan's intrusion, the estate felt different, less like a fortress and more like a cage with invisible cracks. Sienna couldn't shake the look in Evan's eyes, the way his words had slithered into her thoughts like poison. She trusted Cole. At least, she wanted to, but doubt gnawed at her, whispering in the silence between them. And Cole, he was unraveling. She saw in the way his hands lingered on the edge of every doorframe, checking twice before moving on. In the way his voice dropped lower when he spoke to his security team, giving orders like a man planning for war. And in the way he looked at her, like he wanted to hold her close and push her away at the same time. That night, she found him in his office, the glow of a single desk lamp illuminating the lines of strain across his face. Papers were spread before him, but his gaze wasn't on them. It was fixed on the fireplace, where flames crackled low. "You shouldn't be awake," he said without turning when he sensed her presence. She stepped inside, her bare feet silent against the hardwood, her silk robe tied loosely around her waist. "Neither should you." He finally looked at her, and for a moment she saw the man behind the mask, tired, haunted, fighting demons she couldn't name. She walked closer, stopping just short of his desk. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked softly. His jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists against the edge of the desk. "It's not that simple." "It is," she insisted, her voice trembling but firm. "Evan keeps throwing your secrets at me like weapons. And every time you stay silent, it makes me wonder if he's right. If you really are the same." The words wounded her as she spoke them, but they were true. She needed to hear him say otherwise. Cole stood, moving toward her with that quiet, controlled intensity that always left her breathless. But tonight, his composure was cracked. He stopped a breath away, his eyes burning into hers. "Do you think I'd risk everything for you if I were like him?" His voice was low, rough, threaded with pain. She blinked, her throat tightening. "Then what is the truth?" He exhaled, a sound torn between frustration and surrender. "The truth is that Evan wasn't lying entirely. My empire, it wasn't built clean. I've made choices, enemies, sacrifices I can't erase. But the difference is this. Every move I've ever made was to protect what's mine. Evan destroys. I build. And now he's using my past to tear me apart through you." The confession stole her breath. Part of her wanted to recoil, to put distance between them. But another part, the larger part, only saw the torment in his eyes, the man desperate to keep her safe despite the shadows clinging to him. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling against his. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." His grip tightened like a drowning man clinging to shore. Before he could answer, the shrill ring of his phone shattered the moment. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "Stay here," he ordered, but she grabbed his arm before he could pull away. "Cole, no more secrets." "Not now." His eyes met hers, the battle clear in them. But the phone rang again, and with a muttered curse, he answered. The voice on the other end was urgent, crackling through the receiver. Cole's jaw turned to stone. "How long ago?" He listened, silent and tense, then snapped. "Lock it down. Nobody gets in or out without my clearance." He ended the call and turned to Sienna, his face grim. "Evan's making his move. He's bought people inside my security. We don't have much time." Her blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" He closed the distance between them, his hands gripping her shoulders firmly. "It means no matter what happens, you stay with me. Do you understand? Don't listen to anything he says. Don't let him near you. He'll twist the truth until you don't know which way is up." Her heart pounded in her chest, fear surging, but she nodded. "I trust you," she whispered, and for the first time, she saw something break in him at those words, like they cost him more than all his billions combined. The sound of gunfire cracked the air outside the estate, sharp and sudden, making her flinch. Cole moved instantly, pulling her against him, shielding her as chaos erupted. Shouts echoed through the halls, heavy footsteps pounding as his men rushed to their posts. The war Evan promised had arrived. Cole guided her swiftly out of the office, his arms secure around her waist, his movements precise despite the danger. Every corner they turned, his eyes swept first, his body a barrier between her and the threat. "Where are we going?" she asked breathlessly. "Safe room," he muttered. "It's reinforced, locked down, no one gets in without me." But just as they rounded a corner, a figure emerged from the shadows. Evan, gun in hand, his smirk twisting cruelly in the dim light. Going somewhere, Cole shoved Sienna behind him, his own weapon already drawn, aimed steady at Evan. The two men faced off, mirrors of power and hatred. "You never learn," Cole growled. "You can't touch what's mine." Evan's laughter was sharp, echoing through the corridor. "Everything of yours crumbles eventually, Cole. Your empire, your secrets, even her." His gaze slid past Cole to Sienna, venom dripping from every word. "When she finds out what you've done, she'll leave you broken, just like everyone else." Cole's finger tightened on the trigger, his fury barely leashed, but Evan tilted his head mockingly. Go ahead. Prove me right. Show her what kind of man you really are. The tension coiled so tight it felt like the air itself would snap. Sienna's breath caught, fear and desperation colliding inside her. She knew one wrong move would end everything. Her voice broke through the charged silence, trembling but firm. Cole, don't. That's what he wants. Don't let him win like this. Cole's jaw clenched, his chest heaving, but her words reached him. Slowly, painfully, he lowered his gun, though his eyes never left Evan. Evan smirked, savoring the moment. That's what makes you weak, Cole. You let her tame you. But before Evan could take another step, the thundering footsteps of Cole's loyal guards filled the hall. They swarmed in, weapons raised, forcing Evan to retreat. He backed away with that same venomous smile, his eyes locked on Sienna as he slipped into the shadows. This isn't over, he promised, his voice echoing as he disappeared. The guards chased after him, the estate alive with chaos, but for a moment, it was only Cole and Sienna again, both trembling from the storm. He turned to her, his hands cupping her face, his forehead pressing to hers. Almost lost you. Her tears spilled freely now, the fear and love colliding all at once. But you didn't. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her into the kind of embrace that felt like both a promise and an apology. And in that moment, despite the dangers still circling them, despite the secrets still untold, one truth was undeniable. They couldn't turn back anymore. The night bled into chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, guards shouted orders, and the estate, once a symbol of untouchable power, had become a battlefield. Sienna clung to Cole's side as he led her down the back stairwell, his movements sharp and calculated, his hand never leaving her wrist as though letting go meant losing her forever. Every step echoed with the weight of what was coming. The end of this war, the breaking of all the walls between them. When they reached the underground garage, the sharp clang of metal broke the silence. Evan stepped from the shadows, his face gleaming with sweat and triumph, a gun in his hand and malice in his eyes. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? He taunted, his voice echoing through the concrete space. Cole pushed Sienna gently behind him, his own weapon raised, his body radiating lethal calm. It ends tonight, Evan, one way or another. Evan laughed, the sound hollow, broken. You took everything from me. The deals, the investors, the empire that should have been mine. And now her, always swooping in like some savior. But you and I know the truth. You're no savior, Cole. You're just a wolf who hides in finer clothes. His gaze flicked to Sienna, sharp and cruel. And when she learns what you really are, she'll hate you more than she hates me. Cole's voice was steady, but Sienna heard the fracture beneath it. If you want me, take me. But she's not part of this. Evan smirked. She already is. She's your weakness. And that's why I've already won. He lunged forward, his gun rising. The crack of a shot split the air, deafening in the confined space. Sienna screamed, her body frozen in terror, but when her eyes snapped open, it was Evan who staggered back, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his suit. Cole hadn't missed. His aim was true, his hand steady, his eyes locked on his brother without flinching. Evan collapsed against the hood of a car, gasping, his fury still burning despite the wound. Do it, he spat, his voice hoarse. Finish me. Show her who you really are. Cole lowered his gun slowly, his breathing ragged. For a long moment, the weight of the decision hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then he tossed the weapon aside, the clatter echoing through the garage. No, he said firmly. I won't be you. The words rang with finality, with something stronger than vengeance, choice. Evan's eyes widened, shock flashing across his face before the anger returned tenfold. Weak, he hissed. You'll regret this. Guards surged into the garage then, weapons raised surrounding Evan. He struggled, but blood loss weakened him, and within moments he was dragged away, still cursing Cole's name. The silence that followed was heavier than the chaos before. Sienna's heart thundered in her chest, her body trembling as the adrenaline ebbed. She looked at Cole, at the man who had saved her, who had chosen restraint over blood. And for the first time, she saw him not as the untouchable billionaire or the dangerous enigma, but as a man, flawed, scarred, and desperately trying to be better. "You could have killed him," she whispered, her voice shaking. Cole's eyes met hers, shadowed but unflinching. "And I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But if I did, Evan would win. He'd prove I was no different." He paused, his chest heaving as though the confession cost him everything. "I've spent years hiding what I've done, what I've built. I told myself it was to protect the people I cared about, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that if anyone saw the real me, they'd run." His voice cracked, raw and unguarded. "You've seen the worst of me now, Sienna. And if you want to walk away, I won't stop you." Her eyes blurred with tears, her heart splitting under the weight of his vulnerability. She stepped closer, reaching for his hand, her fingers trembling as they laced with his. "You think I hired you because I needed a facade. And maybe at first, that's true. But I stayed because I saw you. Not the billionaire. Not the secrets. You. The man who fights for the people he loves, even when it tears him apart." She pressed his hand to her chest, her voice breaking. "And I'm not walking away." Cole's breath caught, his eyes closing as though her words were too much, too impossible to believe. When he opened them again, they glistened with something she had never seen before. Hope. His hands cupped her face, his forehead lowering to hers, his voice trembling with the weight of every unspoken truth. "I don't deserve you." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she smiled through it. "Then earn me." The kiss that followed was softer than the first, not fire and desperation, but promise and surrender. It was a seal, a vow, a beginning carved from the ashes of everything that had nearly destroyed them. When they finally broke apart, the chaos around them faded into the background. Guards moved, phones rang, the estate's walls groaned with the aftermath of the war. But for Cole and Sienna, the world had narrowed to a single, undeniable truth. They had fallen, and there was no going back. Days later, the estate began to heal, scars hidden beneath polished marble and reinforced walls. Evan was gone, locked away where his venom could no longer touch them. The Whitmore family whispers were silenced by the strength of Cole's presence at Sienna's side. And though the road ahead was uncertain, though shadows of the past lingered, they faced it together. On the balcony where so many unspoken words had hung between them, Sienna leaned against Cole, his arm around her, the horizon painted gold by the rising sun. "Do you ever think about how strange it is?" she mused softly. "That all of this started with me paying you to be my fake fiancé." He chuckled, the sound low and warm against her ear. "Strange," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "But maybe the best investment you ever made." She smiled, her heart steady for the first time in what felt like forever. "No," she whispered, turning her face to his. "The best thing I ever did was choose to believe in you." His lips found hers again, the world falling away until there was only them. The woman who dared to love through the lies, and the man who finally let himself be loved. And in that moment, the story that began with a desperate lie ended with the only truth that mattered. Please like, comment, and subscribe to help me grow.